You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, we're reviewing the final of the ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023 between India and Australia. And what a final it was. Australia victorious, and they have claimed their sixth Cricket World Cup title, a record-breaking sixth title in World Cup cricket. They batted, they bowled well, they fielded well, and they outplayed India in every department of this final. Travis Head's innings of 137 was outstanding. The partnership he had with Marnus Labuschagne was a match-winning partnership when Australia were in trouble at 3 for 47 early on in their innings in the run chase. As I mentioned, Australia, their batting and bowling and fielding was on point. It kept the pressure on India, and India weren't able to combat that pressure. Australia saved their best game until the final, and they definitely played their best game in the final. For India, they were outplayed. Dominant in the group stage, they were dominant in the semi-final against New Zealand, but in the game that mattered the most, the final, they weren't able to get the job done. They faltered in the final, the batting and bowling was below par, and they struggled as Australia marched on to win World Cup No.6. And unfortunately for India, home tournament, home World Cup, they weren't able to get the job done. So there's plenty to unpack, plenty to talk about in this episode today as we review the final of the World Cup. Talk about how both teams went about it with the bat and with the ball, how they performed, and where the game was won and lost. So we've got plenty to talk about in this episode today. Let's get into it. Let's have a look at the match summary from the final of the ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023 between India and Australia from the Narendra Modi Stadium. India batted first and made 240 all out in their 50 overs. KL Rahul top scored with 66 and Mitchell Starc took 3 wickets for Australia. Australia needed 241 runs to win. They chased down the runs quite easily in the end, finishing on 4 for 241 from 43 overs. Travis Head top scored with 137 and Jasprit Bumrah took 2 wickets for India. Australia won by 6 wickets, and Travis Head was named Player of the Match. What were the key moments and key factors from the final of the ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023 between India and Australia from the Narendra Modi Stadium? Travis Head's catch to remove Rohit Sharma changed the momentum of the India batting innings after they got off to a flyer in the first power play to then be bowled out for 240. India's bowlers, having Australia 3 for 47 in 7 overs at the start of the run chase to put Australia under pressure, chasing 240. Travis Head's innings of 137 plus the partnership of 192 for the 4th wicket between Head and Labuschagne guided Australia to victory by 6 wickets and Australia to win their 6th Cricket World Cup title. Those were the key moments and key factors from the final of the ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023 between India and Australia from the Narendra Modi Stadium. Let's talk about how both India and Australia performed in the final of the ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023 from the Narendra Modi Stadium. Let's start with India and talk about their performance in this final with both the bat and with the ball. Let's start with the batters from India and talk about their performance in the final. Rohit Sharma 47, Gill 4, Kohli 54, Iyer 4, Rahul 66, Jadeja 9, and Suryakumar Yadav with 18. And that's how the Indian batters went about their business in this World Cup final against Australia. India's batting, it was a below par batting performance from India, really. Probably one of their most poor batting performances in this World Cup, really. Bowled out for 240, reflected how poorly they batted. in this match. It was very below par. They got off to a good start. They got off to a very good start in the power play in the first 10 overs, mainly down to Rohit Sharma. As he often does, Rohit Sharma gets the team off to a good start with that positive intent, look to take on the bowlers. He certainly did that up front, Rohit Sharma. Made a quick fire 47 off 31 balls. And that set the tone for India. India at one stage were looking like, going to be posting a big score. Pat Cummins won the toss and he elected to bowl and India got off to a flyer. So it could have ended badly for Australia. But it all changed once Rohit Sharma got out. That brilliant catch from Travis Head running back with the flight. Glenn Maxwell got the opening wicket. That pretty much set the tone for the rest of the Indian innings. And after that, India pretty much struggled. Australia applied the screws. They just squeezed India with the bowling. The bowling was superb. The fielding was outstanding. And that pressure was getting built on India. And they weren't able to go anywhere. They just struggled to get any momentum and fluency in their batting. And that's why they were bowled out for 240. So for India, their batting, as I said, was very under par. And I think it was a bit timid as well from India. Their batting was a little bit timid. They were a little bit not willing to take a bit of a risk. The partnership between KL Rahul, Virat Kohli, that was a partnership which was worth, in the end, 67 runs for the fourth wicket. That was the highest partnership for the match for India, and also in their innings. Even in that partnership, Kohli and KL Rahul started to rebuild the innings. India were 3 for 81 when Shreyas Iyer departed, caught behind off the bowling of Pat Cummins. That partnership rebuilt things for India, but they weren't really forcing the pressure back on the Australian bowlers. And between them, there was only one boundary that was hit between Rahul and Kohli, and that was KL Rahul. Hit the first boundary in almost an hour. So it just showed that India really struggled to find the boundary. And as I said, it took them an hour to hit the first boundary, and that was KL Rahul and the partnership between him and Kohli. That was the first boundary after an hour since Shreyas Iyer hit his boundary to get off the mark. And it took a very long time. So they just struggled, India. They couldn't find a way to break the shackles. And I think they were a little bit timid. It is a World Cup final. The pressure, the expectations, everyone expects you to win. Everyone expected India to win this final. It didn't pan out that way. And I think the pressure, the expectations, the game situation, knowing that we're under the pump, it felt like India wanted just to bat, just to stay in the game. And we didn't see the Indian side that we saw in the other games of this tournament, or even in the semi-final against New Zealand. They looked a little bit timid. They looked a little bit nervous. They were under pressure. They didn't want to take a risk. And I think in the end, that's what probably cost them, that inability to put pressure back on Australia, because the Australian bowlers bowled what they wanted to bowl. And yes, the pitch was a little bit slow. It was a little bit difficult to force the pace. But still, India could have done a lot more to force the issue, especially Rahul and Kohli in that partnership. Yes, it was real rebuilding, but they needed to do something to change the attitude and the mindset from Australia, but they weren't able to do that. And then with that inability to, really force the issue and build the pressure, look what happened. Kohli got out. Pat Cummins got him out after Kohli chopped on for 54. And look what happened. They were 4 for 148. The scoreboard didn't go anywhere. And as soon as you lose a wicket, when you're starting to rebuild, you haven't hit a boundary, you're going to be put under more pressure. And that's what happened when Kohli got out. And also KL Rahul got out as well at the wrong time. And then India's tail-enders were exposed. They haven't had to do much in this World Cup, but they were really under the pump. They collapsed and struggled. And that's why India only got to 240. So, yeah, India's batting, that timidness, looking just to bat, just to stay in the game and post a competitive score, pretty much cost them, I think. They could have got a score of 250 plus if they really wanted to, if they just found a way to get through the Australian bowling and put them under some sort of pressure. But they weren't able to do that. And that's where it cost them, that inability to be more proactive with the bat. And Australia were just too good. The pressure that they built up in the field and with the ball, India just weren't able just to get through that. And they really struggled, and it showed in their batting. Also, when India were trying to rebuild a partnership or get some runs, they lost a wicket. And the pressure kept mounting and mounting. And for India, it's the first time in this World Cup they're being bowled out in this World Cup. The game against England, there were 9 down. So in the game against England in the group stage match in Lucknow, there were 9 down against England. They nearly got bowled out in that game. But for the first time in this tournament, India were bowled out. And other teams struggled to do that. But it happened in the final where there was a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations. So, as I said, it wasn't a great batting performance by India. It was below par, not at their best. The top order, didn't really do its job. Yes, there was some good scores from Kohli, and then in the middle order there was some a good contribution there from KL Rahul. But apart from that, and Rohit Sharma's innings, it just sort of fell away, and they didn't really have enough in the tank, really. They were put under pressure. So, as I said, Kohli and Rahul batted well, but their partnership, that needed to go on for India, at least towards the end of the innings, to try and give them some sort of ability and momentum. But it wasn't to be, and they just struggled. So that's why they posted 240, which wasn't enough in the end. Australia chased down the runs with ease. So India will be, very disappointed at their batting in this World Cup final. Looking back on it in hindsight, they could have done a few things differently. But Australia in the end were just too good. The pressure that they built with the fielding and the bowling was just too much for India in the end. And they just didn't have an answer. So overall, a poor, below par batting performance by India. And let's talk about the Indian bowlers and their performance in this match against Australia in this World Cup final. And let's talk about how the Indian bowlers went about their business in this match. 2 wickets for Bumrah, a wicket for Shami and Siraj, no wickets for Jadeja and Kuldeep Yadav. That's how the Indian bowlers went about their business in this final against Australia. It was tested. It was put under pressure, the Indian bowling attack, and they weren't at their best. It had to be said. Defending 240 couldn't be done. The pitch got better to bat on. The talk going into this match was that the pitch would spin, it would keep low, it would be difficult. It didn't really do that, really. And Australia chasing, they chased the runs comfortably in the end. The pitch got better and better, as it usually does in Ahmedabad. Under the lights, it gets better to bat on, and that's what happened. Ball came onto the bat nicely, didn't turn as much, didn't really misbehave. India, they started well. Australia were nervous at the start of the run chase, very frenetic. They lost 3 wickets early, 3 for 47 in 7 overs. So India were on top. The crowd came back into some life. The crowd were pretty much silent throughout the whole game up until that point. And then India were a chance. If they picked up a couple more wickets, who knows? But they couldn't capitalise on that start. And the Travis Head, Marnus Labuschagne partnership took India's bowlers down and put them under pressure. And that partnership pretty much broke the spirit of India in this World Cup final. And it did. The bowlers after that struggled. Bumrah, Shami weren't at their best. They were spraying the ball everywhere, India. They were leaking extras, misfields and fumbles. Siraj wasn't at his best. Even the spinners. Jadeja, wicketless. Kuldeep Yadav, wicketless. That was the big talking point going into this finals, that India's spinners would be, liking their prospects up against this Australian batting order, who don't play spin particularly well, it had to be said. But the pitch didn't really offer any turn. It turned a little, but not as much. And really, the spinners were pretty much ineffective. Jadeja, Kuldeep were pretty much put under pressure. They weren't really effective at all, and didn't have no impact whatsoever. And that's why India were put under pressure with the ball. As I said, the pitch got better under lights. So India's bowling, it has been strong in this tournament. But what Australia did well was that they put them under some sort of pressure. Yes, they lost some early wickets in the first 10 overs of the power play. But the game plan behind that from Australia was to put them under some sort of pressure early to get a bit of a head start in the run chase. Yeah, it sort of backfired a little bit. They lost 3 wickets. But once Travis Head and Marnus Labuschagne established that partnership, you could see the body language change from India. Their heads were dropping. The shoulders were slumping. There was no energy. There was no enthusiasm in the field. Everyone was pretty much upset, angry, frustrated. Jasper Bumrah at one stage hit the stumps and knocked over the bails with his towel in just pure frustration. And you could see that. Rohit Sharma, the same as well. Things not going their way. So that's what pressure does. And pretty much for India in this whole World Cup final, they were pretty much under the pump from ball one, really. And Australia were just too good and relentless in that pressure. So the bowling, once the ball got older, there was a bit of swing and movement for Shami and Bumrah and up front. But once the ball got older, didn't really move around, the pitch got better. It was pretty much Australia's game to lose, really. It became much easier to bat on. And India struggled. And also India, they went away from their game plan as well in this game. Obviously, with the batting, they moved Jadeja ahead of Sky, which they haven't done in this tournament previously. And also with the bowling as well, they bowled Shami after Bumrah instead of Siraj. Why did they do that? Well, because they needed to do something different, because they were put under pressure by Australia, and the partnership from Head and Labuschagne did that. And Siraj, he had a tough time of it. And really, Mohammad Siraj, he's more effective with the new ball. So it didn't make any sense why Rohit Sharma bowled Shami. But I suppose it made some sort of sense because Shami's your wicket taker. You want him to bowl with the new ball because you know that we've got 240 on the board. Deep down inside, India thought that's probably not going to be enough. So that's why we needed to bowl Shami when they did. But obviously that backfired because Siraj was ineffective with the old ball and he's more effective with the new ball. So India did things differently that they wouldn't have done differently in the group stage or even in the semi-final against New Zealand. The only reason they changed their plans and tactics was because of the perceived pressure that Australia put on them with the bat in this run chase. And that's why the bowlers did things that they didn't want to do. And they changed their tactics around. So to finish up about India's bowling, tough day at the office. The bowlers, they've been good in this tournament, but on this occasion in the final, they just weren't good enough. They were below par, and I think India, looking back on reflection, will be disappointed in the way, as a bowling group, the way they bowled in this World Cup final against Australia. Let's talk about Australia's performance in this World Cup final with bat and ball. And first of all, let's start with the Australian batters and their performance in this World Cup final against India. Warner 7, Head 137, Mitchell Marsh 15, Smith 4, Labuschagne 58 not out, and Maxwell 2 not out. And that's how the Australian batters went about their business in this World Cup final against India. Australia, their batting in this final was pretty good in the end. Obviously, Travis Head, Marnus Labuschagne's partnership got them over the line. At the start of the innings, they were a bit nervous, and I think many people would have said, Australia could collapse here at 3 for 47 in 7 overs. Not a great start to begin the run chase. So Australia were in trouble. Another batting collapse probably brewing and probably on its way. But as I mentioned, Travis Head, Marnus Labuschagne's partnership got Australia home and guided them home to another World Cup title. Travis Head's 100 was superb. Labuschagne did his role in the partnership. And Australia, for the first time in this tournament, their batting stood up when under pressure, when in a difficult situation. They found a way to get it done. And that's what they did in this World Cup final. It was pretty good to see, that's for sure. So Australia lost 3 early wickets early on. Obviously, David Warner got out to a poor shot. He was flashing at a wide ball outside off stump. The same thing with Mitchell Marsh as well, just flashing at a wide ball, edging it behind to the keeper, just like David Warner. Steve Smith got an unlucky one. He was out LBW, didn't review it, and it was clearly outside the line. So Australia were in some trouble, but it was good to see Australia just finally stand up, and Travis Head took that initiative, and Marnus Labuschagne, just to calm the situation. And I think the influence of Marnus coming in with Travis Head at that time was important for Australia, just to calm the situation. Everyone was a bit excited, nervous, the adrenaline pumping. It was very frenetic at the start of the run chase. India were on top. They took 3 wickets. So just things just starting, just to change the momentum of this game. And it wasn't until Marnus came in with Travis Head that really changed everything. And the partnership was superb. I thought Travis Head, Marnus Labuschagne, that partnership was pretty good. Probably the best partnership that Australia's had in this World Cup by far, absolutely. But let's talk about Travis Head. What can we say about him? Outstanding century. 137 he made off 120 balls, striking at 114, which is a little bit below Travis Head's usual strike rate in one-day cricket. But nonetheless, it was a superb innings. He played some good shots. He put the pressure back on the Indian bowlers. He just played his game. To do that in a World Cup final, to score 100, to play the way he played when the team were 3 down for 47, chasing 241. For him to take the lead, the initiative, and say, right, I'm just going to put some pressure back on the Indian bowlers. It was just superb innings to watch. And, he's such a good player, Trav. He can change games in a matter of minutes. And that's what he did in this final. Obviously, 3rd Australian to score 100 in a World Cup final. There are 2 others to do that. Obviously, Ricky Ponting back in 2003 against India in South Africa. And then you have Adam Gilchrist's 100 against Sri Lanka back in 2007 in the Caribbean. And Travis Head joins that list. Also, Travis Head joins the list of other batters to score 100 in a World Cup final as well. The likes of Viv Richards, just to name a few, which is a pretty good list to be on for Travis Head. But he played well, and as I said, he really took the game away from India. And let's not forget Marnus Labuschagne. Let's talk about Marnus. There was a lot talked about with Marnus Labuschagne going into this World Cup. He should not be in the World Cup squad because he bats too slow. You can't have Smith. You can't have Labuschagne in the same squad. You can't have them in the same team because they're just too slow. Well, I think Marnus Labuschagne proved his worth in this World Cup squad. He played all the games in the group stage. He played in the semi-final and he played in the final. And Marnus revealed that in the lead-up, the day before the final, he didn't, he only found out that he was playing in the 11, playing in the final at around about 10 o'clock at night before the final, the day before. And he played a magnificent knock of 58 not out and supported Travis Head well in that partnership. And Marnus, he's played some good knocks in this World Cup for Australia, some crucial innings. And the situation required someone of his nature, someone who can bring calmness and serenity, clarity, a sense of reassurance. And that's what he brought. And he gelled well with Travis Head. They had a good partnership going. Travis Head was the aggressor. Marnus could sit back, defend, pick off singles and twos just to keep the scoreboard ticking from his end and let Travis Head do what he did, and he did it well. Go out, attack the bowlers, and put pressure on the likes of Bumrah, Shami, Siraj, Kuldeep Yadav and Jadeja. And that's what Australia did in that partnership. And that was the game-changing partnership. And for once, We all know Australia's batting problems and woes in this World Cup. The middle order hasn't been the greatest, but for once it stood up under immense pressure. In a World Cup final, it stood up and it got the job done. So Australia saved their best batting performance until the final, which was pretty good. Speaking of the partnership, 192 it was in the end for the fourth wicket. 192 for the fourth wicket of 215 deliveries. Was a superb partnership. It's the second highest partnership in a World Cup final. Obviously, no surprise that Ricky Ponting and Damien Martin have the record of 234 unbeaten in the World Cup final against India in 2003. But Travis Head and Marnus Labuschagne achieved something so great in this partnership, and everyone will forever talk about Travis Head's innings, as they should, because it was 100 in a World Cup final, but also the partnership he had with Marnus Labuschagne. Everyone will talk about that. That's where the game was won for Australia, and that's why they got the job done. Other than that, nothing more to say, really. It was in the end, Australia, were able to chase down the runs comfortably in the end. And obviously, Travis Head, unfortunately for him, he wasn't able to score the winning runs. But I think for Trav, knowing that he played a very good knock that contributed to Australia winning this final, he should be very proud of his efforts. Also Marnus as well, to be there at the end, not out. After what he's gone through in this campaign, a lot of scrutiny, criticism about his spot, his plays. Is he really a one-day player? Well, I think Marnus has just shown what he's capable of doing in one-day cricket. So he played pretty well. So Australia's batting, just to finish up there before we talk about the bowling, overall it was a pretty good batting display by Australia, and it stood up when it needed to under pressure, and it got the job done, and they found a way. Let's talk about Australia's bowlers and their performance in this World Cup final against India. 3 wickets for Stark, 2 wickets for Hazlewood and Cummins, a wicket for Maxwell and Zampa, no wickets for Mitchell Marsh and Head. And that's how the Australian bowlers went about their business against India in this World Cup final. Australia's bowling was fantastic. Their fielding was fantastic as well. And the pressure they built up on India by bowling superbly and good fielding really made the difference in this World Cup final. And that's why India struggled with the bat in this final. They kept India under pressure with the ball and in the field. India couldn't get away because they just bowled a relentless line and length. And Pat Cummins has to be applauded for his captaincy. I thought he captained well. He changed the field very well. The field placements were good. The bowling changes were good. He bowled his bowlers in one-over spells just to keep the Indian batters guessing and not getting used to one particular bowler which they can line up. And I think that's good captaincy. So he bowled bowlers in one-over spells. He bowled well himself. He led from the front. He got the big wicket of Virat Kohli, which really changed the course of the match. And the other bowlers did their role as well. Stark, yet again, outstanding. 3 wickets for him. Hazlewood was good as always. 2 wickets. Pat Cummins himself with 2. Maxwell and Zampa chipped in with 1. And even Mitchell Marsh and Travis Head bowled some tidy overs as well. So all the Australian bowlers did their role, but it's one thing having a good bowling performance. You need to back it up in the field, and that's what Australia did. Their ground fielding was superb. The catching was superb. Travis Head's catch to get Rohit Sharma, that was the turning point in the match. What a catch from Travis Head. He had a brilliant game, as we've already talked about with the bat. With the ball, in the fielding performance, he took a very good catch. Running back with the flight, taking that catch of Rohit Sharma. He was off and running Sharma. He set the tone. Once he got out, it changed for India in this World Cup final. And, Australia's fielding was pretty good. They hunted in a pack. They really squeezed the Indian batters. And India couldn't found the boundary. They couldn't score boundaries because the fielding was so good. And that's what fielding does. With good bowling and good fielding, that's what it does. It builds pressure on opposition teams, and that's what happened to India. And Australia's always prided themselves on their fielding. Let's be honest, Australia's fielding in the first 2 games of this tournament was shambolic. It was dreadful. They dropped catches. They misfielded. But as the tournament progressed, up until the semi-final against South Africa and the final against India, the fielding was on point. Exceptional. As we know from Australian teams with the ball and in the field, they always get the job done. They pride themselves on those standards, and Australia were able to do it. They wanted it, and that was the main thing. They wanted it. They wanted the ball. They wanted to get the ball. They wanted to create a chance. And to me, that was the difference between the teams, really. Australia wanted this. India, on the other hand, a bit timid and a bit, how do we go about it? With Australia, they wanted it. And you saw that with the bowling, you saw that with the fielding, and you saw that with the batting when Head and Labuschagne went off. In that partnership, they wanted it. They wanted to win this game. They wanted to win this World Cup. And that was the difference. And there you go. That's how Australia went on to win this game. So to finish up about Australia's bowling, it was a great bowling performance, great fielding display. Pat Cummins captained well. The team just did what they needed to do, and they got the job done. To bowl India out for 240 after winning the toss and bowling first, which was a very gutsy call from Pat Cummins. But he thought that's the best way for Australia to win this match. If we bowl first, bowl India out for a target of 240, which they did in the end, something manageable, then we can chase it down. Because here in Ahmedabad, the pitch gets better to bat on once you get into the evening. And that's what happened. The pitch got better. Australia found it comfortable to bat at night. And Pat Cummins made a very brave and very smart decision, which paid off. Of course, if it didn't pay off, criticism, of course, but Pat was prepared for that. He was prepared to own up to the responsibility of that decision. It was a gutsy call, but it was the right call in the end, and Australia made the most of it. They bowled well, they fielded well, and then they got the job done with the bat. So overall, a great bowling and fielding display by Australia in this World Cup final. By far, their best performance in the field and with the ball in this entire World Cup campaign. My final thoughts from this World Cup final between India and Australia to finish off our review of the final today. My final thoughts and observations. Australia too strong in the end. Outplayed India in the final. They saved their best game until last, and they certainly played their perfect game in this World Cup final. Pat Cummins said, we wanted to play our perfect game. We weren't able to do that in this tournament, but they certainly did it in the final. They played their perfect game of the tournament. Travis Head's 100 was superb. The way he batted, the way he took the game on, Travis Head, put the pressure back on the Indian bowlers, was superb to watch. Thoroughly deserved his World Cup 100 in a World Cup final. Marnus Labuschagne was good in support of Travis Head. The partnership there was superb. His innings was key. The bowling, the fielding from Australia was on point. The pressure they put on India was too much. And that's why they were able to win their 6th Cricket World Cup title. On the other hand, India, at the end of the day, they weren't at their best in this final. They didn't play their best cricket in this final. Obviously, weren't good enough on the day. But I think all their fans and I think the Indian team themselves should be proud of their efforts in this World Cup. To win 10 games in a row without losing one up until the finals, a tremendous effort. They played some outstanding cricket in this tournament. Unfortunately, in the final, Australia were just better at the end of the day. After starting this Cricket World Cup 0-2, Australia have come back to win their 6th Cricket World Cup title. India will be disappointed, but winning 10 matches in a row was a great achievement. But in the game that counted, they couldn't get the job done. Thanks everyone for listening to this episode of the podcast today. I also want to say thanks everyone who tuned in to the podcast during our Cricket World Cup coverage over the last few weeks. I hope you enjoyed it just as much I have in bringing it to you. I hope you enjoyed every episode, every live stream that we did. during this Cricket World Cup tournament over the last few weeks. So thank you for your support and for watching and listening to the podcast. If you're listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on this final between India and Australia in the comments. We would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.